Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. I'm Tom Strong, President and CEO of CanBIM and Principal at Wired Construction. Thank you for joining us for setting the foundation of your digital buildings lessons from the front. And this is a panel discussion that's going to be hosted by Geraldine Rayner. She's the director of Summit BIM Consulting. She's got 30 years of experience. She works with owners and clients, helping them to sort out their digital strategy and get their data sorted and producing as-built around buildings. And she's probably one of the top experts in Canada on this subject matter, having worked with many clients across Canada. So thank you very much, Geraldine, for participating and helping to host. And I'll turn it over to you. Okay,
thank you, Tom. Welcome to everybody, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. I'm in Vancouver and Stefan's in Vancouver, Derek's in Toronto, and Victor's way out in Halifax. So you've got us right the way across the country to provide some different opinions and different perspectives. A couple of housekeeping things. We do have some polls that we would like people to answer. The third question in the poll is actually something that requires a written answer. So we would ask you to please put that into the Q&A and put question 3 or P3 in front of your answer so that it will be easier for us to find them. That would be great. So thank you very much. Now let me sort of introduce everybody. I'm going to introduce just at a high level and then ask them to provide you with additional details or about themselves. So I'm going to start with Derek, who's the manager BIM and strategic sourcing at Matinee Homes. Derek, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sounds good. Thanks, Geraldine, and thanks for having me. So I'm the manager of BIM and strategic sourcing at Matinee Homes, and so for the past 2 to 3 years or so, Matinee has been on a journey to change up our methodology of low-rise, especially in the low-rise side of residential home building. So I entered at around the start of that point of the journey, and I've been following along with trying to build this up. My background is actually in mechanical engineering, and I've spent a good couple of years in the EPCM world, doing piping stress analysis and all sorts of other fun things with oil and gas and mining clients. Upon which time I decided to do an MBA and have ended up in the low-rise home building world. So not too far from my original starting point, but it's been a fun journey.
Okay, and Stefan Melnick, who's the director of mixed-use projects at Century Group. Stefan, tell us about yourself.
Thanks for having me, and thank you to CanBIM. Yes, I've had over 20 years experience in project management through all types of operating assets, industrial, municipal infrastructure, and now find myself in the residential side of projects. And with Century Group, we are involved in big, mixed-use assets that span over 8-year periods. They're becoming more and more complex, and I'm interested in BIM as a tool to use to improve the quality of the delivery of these projects, as it's becoming quite difficult to hand over and pass some of these off to our facilities groups.
Okay, and Victor, you're for the the project coordinator at Halifax International Airport. Tell us about yourself.
Yes, thanks for having me. So I work as an air terminal project coordinator with the airport for just over 1.5 years now. And I have just over 10 years experience in AEC in different roles, primarily in BIM management, consulting, implementation, as well as a mechanical engineering technologist. So on the design side for M&E and architectural design as well. So currently at the airport, one of my roles is to spearhead that development of a strategy, a long-term strategy of standardizing our BIM practices and our procedures working very closely hand in hand with all of our facility management stakeholders and our infrastructure services team. So we're looking at leveraging the experience we have had in the past several years, and then improving on that, using those lessons learned to guide us in the coming years to improve all of our project outcomes and our life cycle management.
Okay, thank you all very much. So, a question that I'd like to pose to you all is really, what drove you and your organizations to adopt lifecycle BIM on your last projects? And leading on from that, how many projects have you utilized it on? So what's your experience level with doing this and implementing BIM from a life cycle perspective? Derek, maybe you can start us off on this conversation.
Sounds good, Geraldine. So on my end, it's a bit of a two-part question, the way it's phrased. So I'll start with what my company has been doing and how sort of we entered this BIM world from a relatively, I guess, lower tech of low-rise home building, where most of what we do is, Part 9 OBC, stick-built design type thing. So it really started, and it was an interesting conversation, although this was before my time. It started from a senior management meeting where they were discussing the alignment of CAD standards. So really, at that point in time, we were still having, I guess, different scaling or different inputs from our various vendors, and it was making it difficult for us to align the designs quickly. And so the discussion started there, and we ended up with the question of, well, why don't we look into the world of BIM, because that is the next latest and greatest thing. And just from that conversation onwards, we sort of charged on for the last 3 years to where we're at now. And a lot of what happened, although it started from an architectural point of view of aligning our designs and making sure our outputs were standardized, it had a lot of what we call the spillover, the ripple effect. So it started off being that, we have an architectural model where we were aligning the structural elements of, an engineered floor and our walls, and then, steel beams. And then as that went on, we took a look at, well, let's clash detect our HVAC and, perhaps build in some plumbing stacks to it so that we make sure that none of the studs or none of the joists are in the way of any plumbing elements. And so we ended up with that model. And at that point in time, which is around when I joined, I asked the question, well, we have all these items modeled. We also have, a lot of data that from just modeling this, we'll have the 3D data, we'll have some element data. Why don't we take this data and build it out into, the cost profile for the house? And that was what led to the thought, or, of us going down the road of building out a takeoff platform for us to use, and so on and so forth. And the same thing happened when we had some discussions with with our construction group and to look at the 3D model. We looked at it and said, well, can we not produce some simplified drawings, something with like a little bit more directed value, for instance, something specific for a framer, and then something specific for an interior carpenter or something like that, to make everybody's lives easier. And for once you have a 3D model and a single source of the truth, that it becomes relatively easy to produce separate viewpoints of items and to print that out. And so really it was a bit of an organic progression as to the realization of what BIM can bring to a company like ours. And I have to say that progression is not over. We're still working day by day and refining what we're trying to produce. Sometimes it's a couple of steps forward and maybe a few steps back. But it's a process. It's never, at least in my mind, it's never that. We can't just jump to the final conclusion and ta-da, this is it. It's always going to be a developing process, especially when it's being driven from an owner's perspective. So it's been fun.
Okay, well, thank you. So, Stefan, what led you to take Century Group down this road, would you agree with Derek's path, or have you had a slightly different path into this?
Well, and I would say I do agree with Derek. Similar circumstance. Our senior leadership, we went through a quite complex, multi-use, all-in-one building, hotel, residential condo, and office build, all with a central lobby and common podiums. And did not have BIM on that project, and the big things that came out of that where we found we weren't coordinated properly in the design. We were reworking a lot of stuff. I actually called it there is a contract for design build, and I called it a build design, which there is no contract. So it was very cumbersome. I think that what drove us was the pain of that. And Century Group builds its own operating assets, and so the hotel and the office were ours, and I have to hand that over to a facilities group here, an operating group here, and unfortunately for me, the director sits right next to me of facilities, and I hear it constantly every day. From that past project on, where's this information? Hey, I have to deconstruct this mechanical closet to access this piece of equipment. Thank you very much. So accuracy of placement in the building, and just handover of data. And, we found that all of our data was scattered across the project. And, maybe that's our document management issues. I don't know, but we needed a central repository for this data, and somewhere we could just rely on it through the built process to be tracking that data was actually being collected and put in a place that we needed to. And then so, as I worked towards moving towards this, I thought, well, we'll just do BIM, and that's going to be a virtual coordination tool, and it'll solve our design issues. And like Derek said, it's not that simple. And so, I think fortunately for me, I went to another conference and connected to understand that BIM can do much more than that for us. And so we've, looked at BIM more as a data model now, and a place to actually not only do the design and accuracy of where we're placing things, but also to be a resource for collecting and making sure that our as-built condition matches our design condition, and that the data that we need for each of these assets we're tracking is being collected throughout the design, construction process. Because what we find is, as you get closer to the end of the project, and especially at that substantial completion mark, holdbacks go away, and you eventually get abandoned. And if you don't have the data you need, you're just basically handing over something that's not very useful to our operating group, and that's really where the costs start to click. So, yeah.
How about you, Victor? Is your journey a similar journey, and similar issues drove you to look at a new delivery solution?
Yeah, one of the main pursuits, the main drivers behind pursuing BIM was reducing capital expenditure, so reducing costs during an expansion or renovation project. At the same time, attempting to improve construction schedules, and then during handover, which is not just happens at handover, but throughout the BIM process, being able to improve record information accuracy, which pays off for obviously facility management, but also during reactivating certain pieces of our data, of our infrastructure for a new renovation, new expansion, where there's an overlap between new and old. So those are all benefits that are promised by BIM technology and the BIM process. So it was first adopted for design and construction, and now we're developing our strategy to implement BIM in our asset management strategy, because there's obviously an array of other benefits that can be captured for asset management for the life cycle of an asset, not just during design and construction. And one of the main reasons behind that is in many design and construction environments, just the way the industry operates in our region, at least, and I think this varies from region to region, but it's a common experience, is that the process is owned. And there was a question earlier in the earlier sessions about that. often the process is owned by whether it's the design team or the GC, and there's kind of a handover process that's imperfect, and it then there's a huge loss of information through each handover from design to construction to FM, to the owner. So we want to mitigate that loss of information. We see that potential with fully coordinated 3D models, and then this wealth of metadata associated to those elements in the model. But can we actually use it for FM? And you have to go backwards to be able to answer that question. You have to say, well, what do we actually need? And many of the questions that we'll probably get into. But that's essentially the headspace of our project team right now. And so far, we've used it. We would say that BIM has been a part of the process for design and construction on around 8 renovation or expansion projects.
Okay, so leading on from that, and maybe I'll ask you, Victor, to speak to it, is sort of many owners are struggling to define and implement a robust BIM process. What's the biggest challenge you found as an owner to adopting BIM?
Yeah, I alluded to it just in my previous comment that a common experience that I've observed with infrastructure owners, operators, and the airport here has encountered as well to a degree, is an over-reliance on outside expertise when it comes to defining the BIM process and the deliverables too. So if we take an example, it's not a perfect analogy, but where an owner trusts a consulting architect or an engineer to meet all the relevant building codes, and perhaps sometimes that's not even included as a requirement in a contract. It's maybe in specifications as a blanket statement sometimes. Well, that same approach regarding BIM, where it's a blanket statement, it's essentially an assumed requirement. It falls apart very quickly for a few reasons. So, unlike building codes, BIM is not, obviously it's not regulated, and in Canada, it's not mandated yet. So, I'm of the opinion that we're still in the early days of having a ubiquitous, a broadly applicable standards. And so that's not to say that BIM defining our expectations is impossible, but without a conscientious effort from the owner, on the owner's behalf, to define those expectations, there can be a big misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding right from the start between the owner and then the design and construction team.
So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so how have you set about in your RFPs or your procurement process in establishing, what your requirements are, as well as what is the ability of the teams that you're actually bringing them on to actually meet what it is you're asking for? Are you checking for the compliance during the process, having established your requirements?
Yeah, so like I said, we're essentially in the early stages of developing that process, but having identified that it's crucial for sure. So one experiment, we could call it, or it was successful to a degree with one of our major past projects, was making training mandatory for the construction team and all of their subcontractors. That's after having identified that there was a lack of BIM capabilities with some of the smaller trades in our region, and so that was for the BIM 360 platform, and that was with the guidance of the design consultant and the GC. And I think that's throughout a process, depending on who you identify as potential bidders in an RFP process, that can be a key step. And we've kind of taken that lesson, and moving forward, we've begun to interview outside or in advance of future RFPs, undertaking interviews with general contractors. Again, that's a weak point in our industry, in our region, when it comes to BIM maturity. And we give them that opportunity at that point to showcase their process, showcase their abilities with BIM. And, we found that the delivery bottleneck, or the deliverable bottleneck in some of our larger projects has been during construction, where there's, like I mentioned, that loss of information from, a coordinated design model. And then that process, because of lack of training, can fall apart. So there's things we do, like exchanging draft BIM execution plans with them, sample model data, other information as part of that conversation and interview process. And again, this is simply in an effort to understand what the industry is capable of, and then matching, aligning our expectations to that as we develop our BIM standard and processes. So having an internal resource I think is key as an owner operator. I've fallen in that role as having that BIM expertise, but also a project coordinator. I'm not a segmented, kind of think tank to our owner. I'm right in the mix, and understanding the needs of all of our stakeholders is key. But having that internal resource that has a proven ability I think is key to the longevity and even the initial success of any BIM standard.
So are you actually sort of building an in-house BIM expertise?
Yeah. So like I said, I mentioned, my experience was coming into my role here is primarily in BIM. And so I'm able to, with our infrastructure services, who also have done extensive research, but have a tremendous amount of workload focused on delivering these products for our stakeholders and O&M. You need a sort of a holistic view of where we want to be years from now, what are we capable of now, what have we attempted, and how to essentially build on all of that. So continued training, and like I said, reaching out to industry stakeholders, either vendors that are going to bid on our projects or comparable owner operators, reaching out, finding out what has been successful.
Okay, thank you. And so Stefan, over to you, and sort of what are you asking for when you put out an RFP for BIM, and how are you aligning your requirements with what you want to collect and hand over?
Similar to what Victor's saying, we started out by just procuring, saying, design to BIM LOD 200 and 300 in select areas, and sent out our procurement. And that was our maturity with BIM at the time. And like I said, fortunately for me, I was an early stage, and we hadn't signed up the entire contract yet, but as we were two-stage tendering it, but understanding that we needed to do a lot more with the model than just say that. And what we needed to do was be able to take what was the requirements of our facility group, and, the what are you asking for part, and some of the other things we wanted to do with the quality during the design phase and the construction phase, and try and translate that into some kind of requirements document. Now, Century Group is, at the time, and myself included, had a low level of maturity with them, and so we actually didn't decide to do it in-house. And I quickly realized we needed some consultancy on this, and that's what we did. We went out to the experts, and that's, I would say, if you don't have a in-house expertise, that's a great resource. Just go and get yourself a BIM consultant. Because what I find happens is everyone has their own definition, or their own, I wouldn't call it their own definition, their own process. And the owner seems to be left out of that process. The design team sees BIM as they're on their own island with it, I'll call it. And the contractor typically is on their own island with BIM, and the owner's sitting there on his island, and no one's connecting the dots. And so what we needed to do was, recognize that, and what we produced was an owner's BIM requirements, which we then sent out in our second stage of procurement. The challenge with that was, we found our team not used to that process. Within the residential field, they had their BIM managers. Certain team members had a level of maturity themselves that we just weren't realizing that they would have. And so each individual design professional or engineer professional, I think it's important at the early procurement stage, and like Victor's alluding to, if you need to get out there with that requirements document and be doing an evaluation and meeting the team and understanding their capabilities through BIM process, and flushing out some of the challenges we've had with just advancing level of detail early and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think that's the most challenging part of what we're asking for.
So how sort of from your perspective, how important has actually been understanding the BIM maturity of the people responding to your RFPs been? Have you had challenges?
It was extremely important, because what we're asking for, they pushed back on. They couldn't do it in-house, and so and some of that was due to just, I think sometimes we're asking to hand over a record model. We clearly stated that it was the 2D set was going to be the legal document and the contractual document, but I think there's a reluctancy or a fear sometimes to pass off some of this model information and that transparency into the model. And so that was one of the things I felt that there was just to be some kind of fear around the process we wanted. I'm not sure why. Still need to discover that. And then the other thing was just us not understanding, what is the diagrammatic things that different disciplines need to be at certain times. So they don't advance their design far enough along sometimes for us to be asking for what we're asking for. And I think the key is, if you're doing this, is to be, what Derek's saying is you got to kind of see it as a process, and it's not like I'm putting out this requirements document and I'm just gonna, stick you to it. You have to be flexible as an owner to discover some of these things, and I think adjust your plan. We strategized all this through a BIM execution plan, and sometimes we had to make modifications to that plan. It wasn't a contractual document, but it was a strategy, and so we were, as an owner, we were flexible around that. I think that's the key with some of these challenges with people's maturity level, and just start it, because I think there's a benefit in the end. This is our first BIM project, collecting structured data in the way we are. I haven't gone through the construction phase yet, Victor, so I'll probably want to debrief with you later. You're scaring me already, but speaking of fear, you have to be bold, and I think you have to jump in with this. And I think owners drive the process, and if we want to see these things work out, we need to be facing these challenges head on, and so that's, I'm not a very technical person with BIM, but that's just the way we've treated it, and I'm finding it working out quite well for us.
So you alluded to it earlier in your earlier introduction, but how did you as Century Group sort of start the process of actually defining what it was that you actually wanted from this?
So we ended up, like I said, getting some consultancy, and we actually facilitated a workshop with our internal group, and that included development and operations and finance, because we moved these assets eventually into a CMMS system, and we want to track them through the life cycle of the project. So we gathered together, and it was facilitated by the consultant, and we ended up getting an owner's requirements document and a list of what we would call tracked assets with geometry specifications to them and data collection specifications to them, and that kind of defined how far along you had to move the geometry of each of those assets at various stages in the design. And then it also kind of defined what data we wanted to attach to each of those assets, and that's basically the stage we're at. We're really working through the geometry piece right now. We built out level of accuracy tables so that we can be sure that items are being placed accurately in the design where we want them, and the guys don't have to go searching around for a valve somewhere to shut something off. And then the other part would be taking that through, like Victor said, into the construction phase and readjusting our strategy plan and ensuring that as-built condition maintains that. And it is a little more onerous on the team, but the upfront effort, I find, and there is some cost to it, but I believe the upfront effort will resolve a lot of the issues you'd go through at the time where you don't have a chance to evaluate a tender, or you don't have a chance to, it's all negotiated changes and as-builts later that don't match what you really have. So that's kind of the step we took as an owner BIM requirement document, which defined all those specifications for us.
Okay, thank you. So Derek, if we come back to you, what have you found to be the sort of greatest challenge? And maybe to add to that, once you face that challenge, how have you handled the issues and the disruption that challenge has actually caused for you?
So as far as challenges go, I think a lot of what we were just talking about, or Victor and Stefan were just talking about, really does apply in low-rise construction as well. Although I must say that it's similar challenges, but quite a different context. So I'll elaborate a little bit more on that side of things, because with Madame mainly focusing on, well, at least for the BIM rollout initially, where I'm focused on is for low-rise residential construction for detached or attached homes. So it's a very different set of circumstances, because we're not dealing with just one building, but essentially one type of building with a whole bunch of variations possible based on grading, particular locations, so on and so forth. And so I don't think any existing like BIM software or product or even thought process has fully covered how to handle this type of scenario. So that's sort of the reason why a lot of this had to be driven from, I guess, the owner side, from ourselves, is because there just isn't a standardized solution out there right now. So that adds a little bit of a new dimension or new sort of complexity to the matter. But by and large, a lot of the challenges that both Stefan and Victor said also apply to us. So one of the main things is BIM maturity from our suppliers, and in this case, it's an even tougher evaluation, because let's face it, even on the owner side, there's not much maturity, because we're just trying to figure stuff out as well. And so I guess to resolve on our end, or trying to resolve this piece of the challenge, Stefan made a very good point of having a good BIM consultant, and I think for us, we found a very, very strong BIM consultant to partner with early on, and so they started even before I joined the company. But they've been a very solid partner for us and handled a lot of the technical realm of things. Where for us as Madame, we've been mostly directing from a process side of what sort of outputs we need. So it's been a very promising, I guess, collaboration with BIM Studio so far. So that has worked out pretty well. Now, from the perspective of trying to change the minds of the people in our industry, that's another factor that for me was a very big challenge, because I think this is exacerbated again by the type of industry that I'm in, being that it's a wood frame construction, and also with residential, if you turn on HGTV or whatnot and take a look at what those channels show in terms of home renovations, a lot of it seems quite simple, and in some ways it is. So as you're progressing with a construction project that's based on a wood frame structure and drywall, a lot of things that, let's say, if it doesn't quite match on an engineering drawing, once you put it together, you can sort of move things around slightly to make everything fit together. That's simply not possible when you're dealing with steel and a concrete structure, right? So although you would think that would make things easier, when you're going the route of BIM, because BIM is all about having everything properly standardized, modeled out properly. When you present this to to existing site crews or trades or whatnot, it's very often that you get the feedback that, we don't need that level of accuracy, because we've never gotten that level of accuracy, and we're quite used to it, and therefore we can just adjust it whichever way we want. And to try to change that mindset is, it takes carrots and it takes sticks. So in some cases you have to be forceful, and in some other cases you have to sort of showcase the benefits of what it is that you're developing for your trades and for the industry itself to make everything more efficient. And so I guess this is just a relatively different angle of approach, but a lot of times it really is the same thing, because we are, no matter what industry specifically you're in, or rather which part of this construction industry you're in. What we're rolling out is brand new technology, and we're trying to get everybody aligned. So understanding where we stand as far as owners and what we want out of rolling out this technology, and being very clear cut about it, then evaluating our trade partners, our vendors or consultants for their capability to deliver, and also finding BIM consultants to sort of fill in the gap. All of these things are extremely important no matter where you stand.
So it is one of our poll questions, but what has been your biggest change management issue? Has it been the people, the process, the policy, or the technology? Where for you has been the greatest challenge?
Are we sticking with me on this one?
Yeah, it's just for you.
Okay, I can 100% say for me, like, although all of those poll items are important, for me 100% the people, because no matter how good the technology is, no matter how robust your process is, if the people that you're working with, and like it really, I think I already answered my question just now at the tail end of the last question, but without the level of buy-in that you need to acquire, and without without people believing in the technology and understanding how this process works with their day-to-day, it's practically impossible to roll it out, even if it's the best thing since sliced bread. So on that subject.
and Victor and Stefan, would you agree people are the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Derek on that. Like I said, we would have procured differently at the beginning, knowing what we know today. And a lot of that, like when I think of early design procurement, I'm looking at more of a quality of that team and the quality of that proposal from the proponent, and not so focused on, I shouldn't say this, but what is the fee there? And it really comes down to who your team is. I'd probably list it at 60% of my evaluation is based on team. And if we don't have the right team, and interviewing that team and checking BIM manager references and experience, you're just going to run into a brick wall or at least a speed bump or a bump. And it just slows down the whole process. It just takes one team member to just really stop you in your tracks. And so, it's important that everybody's aligned, and that's done early. And the sooner you understand what you want, so you can communicate that out in your proposal call, the better off you're going to be. So I would really do a lot more due diligence around that.
Okay. So Victor, before I move on to the next question, which is going to you, would you also agree that people are the greatest challenge?
Yeah, and I would preface that with the importance of an owner to understand the why. Before, so evaluating expertise from anybody that wants to be on a project, whether it's on the design or construction side, and then internal resources. How do you allocate tasks internally? Your impetus to evaluate that properly really relies, or is, I guess, the foundation is, understanding why you need to evaluate, and understanding how important it is. You're back to your benefits of why do we want to use BIM? What are the short-term and the long-term benefits? And do we really care about it? Is it secondary to something else, like just the schedule or the physical outcome of a project, or just getting it done? If it is secondary, then kind of evaluating the people often can, the BIM expertise as a siloed item, for example, on an RFP, can kind of be brushed off, when really it should be integral. You need experts in their fields that have made use of BIM successfully, integrated that into the process, not treated as an ancillary tool in their toolbox.
So is there a specific moment, Victor, sort of on your BIM implementation journey, where you actually wished you'd done something differently? And, you know, if you were to do it again, what would you actually change?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think discussing it benefits anybody who's thinking about it. You know, some of my comments personally maybe are, like Stefan mentioned, are maybe startling, but really it's more about how do we use lessons learned in a positive way. So in one instance on a major project, there was great hopes for the potential of BIM, but the requirements were too broad. So there was in a sense, they were too specific and too broad, because there was an LOD that was specified, you know, in a paragraph kind of thing in a contract, and that while the LOD was high, it was broad, and so as a starting point, that's perfectly fine. But without a granular definition of that LOD scope or the information requirements that are associated to each of those, you know, the metadata, if you will, that's associated with a model, not just the geometry, but all of the parameters, the metadata, the information that you're going to use. If you don't have a way to control for that, then that broad requirement just ends up being resulting in kind of a wide range, you know, throughout your models. You could have super specific components on the M&E side, or, you know, your structural might be bang on if you have steel and it's prefabbed, and that was our case. And then some other disciplines, there was a wide range of LODs and little control on the project information requirements. So what we've changed, what we're aiming to do, is to lead the conversation right from the start when it comes to the BIM requirements. And I'll plug the one of the tools we've been using, which is Plannerly, and it's an online collaborative platform. So, you know, you could communicate your intentions, your requirements through an Excel spreadsheet if you want. If there's any means are possible, but we found that by having an online collaborative platform that you can you build out your BIM execution plan in a collaborative manner with, you know, the design team from the start, and you bring on, if it's a design build, you know, it works even better. You can bring your GC in at the start, and you basically establish an agreement on entire disciplines, and then all of the sub elements within a discipline, both in the LOD and at what project milestone that LOD is captured, and then all the project information associated to it. So you can be super specific, and you're doing it by an element category basis. It's, you know, it's visual. It's you can send out things for comment, get reviews back on a comment. So we found it to be a great tool so far, and you can even it has potential with, you know, which other tools do as well, which is scheduling. You know, once you're into design phase and construction phase, scheduling that LOD development, as was mentioned earlier by Derek. Not everything, you don't need everything from day one, and you definitely don't expect everything to just show up at IFC. You need, you know, or a handover with your eyes closed the whole way up until handover. You really need to be able to go into the data that's being authored and then modified during construction, and audit it, monitor it, and have a conversation. You know, so if you have a platform to do that on, that's extremely powerful.
Okay. So Derek, if I come back to you, sort of what, from your perspective, has been the sort of important from choosing a pilot project? You know, what criteria makes a good pilot project for those people that want to begin this journey?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, on that topic, with and relating that back to some of the pain points, or what I wish I could have done better, I guess, when we were rolling out BIM at Mademy, was to, you know, have a better establishment of the process, and also the timeline that Victor just touched on, and also you know, I guess, provide better training internally for a mutual understanding of what it is that we're actually delivering. And so choosing, I think all of those go into like we can sort of set the tone by choosing a proper pilot project in order to do so. And one of the things that I found was, well, you know, with Mademy, basically every year in Canada we build about 4,000 homes. So we have a lot of projects to choose from. Now, choosing one particular project, and I can't necessarily say that there was an exact project that I could have chosen and I didn't choose or whatnot. But I think some of the most important criteria to make a good choice is, number one, how representative is that particular pilot for in the grand scheme of the whole company of when you're rolling it out. And this may be, again, let me reiterate, this may be very specific to low-rise construction, because we have products that we, that are spanning a couple of communities, and, they're not necessarily going to be one-offs and some such. So, coming up with a project that really has high visibility and a lot of buy-in is quite important. And on the topic of buy-in, having the people, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, having strong people to buy in and who know the existing process, but trust that what you're rolling out to them will deliver, even more value, and from there sort of spread the gospel for you, so to speak, is also equally important. Because, again, with a pilot project, what you're trying to do is showcase some of these scenarios. So,
okay. Thank you, Stefan. You're sort of the other end. You don't do single family homes, you do multi-story residential towers. So what are your thoughts as to the greatest challenges?
If you're right, we do, million buildable square feet, multiple towers, different uses. We really need to just, I think our challenges are just to better understand the robustness of BIM. And then, really, like I alluded to earlier, formalizing that in a document early, and then really understanding each of our team members' challenges as well. I think it's not just our own challenges, but the challenges of our team and the industry in general. And I think, when you're going to go down this process, it really speaks to integrated delivery. Unless you are, like Victor said, doing a design build process. But even that, I'm finding everything's integrated now. And if we're not moving in that direction, you're kind of leaving someone out of the process that really needs to understand how it's, but why and what we're doing. And so we've, our challenges at the beginning were, on the design side, but we've discovered a lot of the potentials, and we've structured a BIM execution plan now and a set of owner requirements that I think, going forward, we're able to go out and now procure MEPF contractors into the team early in the design here to support our, MEP consultants. And, because like alluded to earlier by Victor, we also had a level of development or detail, whatever the term is, for the geometry at certain design phases, and we quickly discovered our mechanical contractor, would not be able to meet that without some support from the actual contractor in the field. And so, we're looking now at we do internal construction here, self-perform, and we work closely with our contracting team to look for that in the evaluation of those contractors. And so, we have opportunities to do fabrication models, bring them back to the design model now, and really just build in that whole collaborative process right through design with the contractor, and like you said, buy-in as we move forward into the construction phase of the project, execution phase of the project. So yeah, I think those are the main challenges, was just knowing what we needed, being able to communicate that to the team, and then understanding our own team's challenges with what we were communicating. That's been our biggest challenge, and I think that's going to be ongoing. I don't think that's ever going to end. I see that being something we just have to deal with, and like I said, you have to be a little flexible with this and not rigid.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. And I quickly address the sort of the last point, which has actually been iterated many times. And Victor, I'll ask you to speak to it first. Is sort of collaboration amongst the stakeholders. Is we've heard this repeatedly. Can you just very quickly, before we go to questions, give us your thoughts? the importance of that?
Yeah, I think it's key. If you try to develop a strategy or plan that involves BIM in a vacuum, you'll encounter all the pain points that we've mentioned. Some of them are inevitable, I think. So while we're definitely in a transition period, industry wide, as was alluded to in some of the earlier sessions and around the world, there's a very high level of resources available to owners and operators, amongst our peers and our counterparts. So I think reaching out to someone that you think might be in the same situation as you. There's use cases that have been published, out of major universities and some critical infrastructure operators that show, here's this amazing success story, and here's how we solved all these problems that you might encounter too along the way. So being proactive and reaching out to do that, I think is key. And we're doing that to a certain extent as well. We have discussions around process software training with some consultants locally, and then I would recommend looking beyond your software reseller. Looking at specialized BIM consultants, I think is key as well. And then some of our events like the Camera conferences and the industry think tanks, it's another valuable resource that we can tap into.
Okay, Derek, 30 seconds for you to respond to what you think, and then Stefan.
I think Victor covered a lot of good points. I would reiterate something that we talked about earlier, which is the BIM maturity of your vendors, your trades, and as well as you as an owner. Don't get stuck on that point. At least from my perspective, is because, like we said, BIM is evolving, and there's still so much that we're still designing or still working on. In some cases, yes, we're evaluating maturity, but in some cases, we're trying to bring each other up. So all those resources that Victor has mentioned in terms of think tanks and following up with CanBIM is very important in order for us to move forward as an industry as a whole.
Okay, and Stefan, your final thoughts?
Yeah, just quickly, I think we've said it all, but I think this is the venue. It's getting together and having these conversations, and I think it would be very helpful. If I'm out in Vancouver, but if I go to AIBC, BIM is listed as just an additional service. And what does that mean to everybody? And developing some standards and developing some process against maybe different types of projects, and joining, like you said, Derek, being part of that process in a think tank or being part of that process to just kind of support the industry to go through some of the pains they're going through and lean into the discomfort of it. I think it's been a really, I think someone said fun the other, Victor, you might have said fun, but I would agree with that. It's not, it hasn't been as painful as I thought it would be. So.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for partaking in this. And Thomas has joined us, and he's going to help us through some of the questions that have been posed. I don't know whether they've been assigned to specific people or they're just general. But Thomas, I'll let you manage.
I put my mic back on here. Yeah, there was a lot of great chat in the chat panel. So I would encourage everyone to go check that out and continue that conversation. We are pretty close to the top of the hour. So the one question that came through here that I wanted to address was, do you think that widespread adoption of BIM will lead to increased automation with software to reduce dependency on individual team members, AKA, am I going to lose my job because of automation and technology? And I think that was specifically related to generative design and the impact there. But earlier today we had a presentation from Autodesk talking about predictive maintenance and whatnot. So there's efficiencies come at the cost of labor hours, right? That's how it works. So I would like to kind of get everyone's thoughts on that as we kind of march forward with driving all this technology out into the workforce.
I don't mind commenting. I've looked into a little bit of automation and AI, where that fits in currently, or what it promises in the short term, and it's still quite limited, I think. But long term, I think it's inevitable. Like any other industry that uses technology, it's gonna it's going to have an impact, a deep impact on our industry. But again, what we can do right now to potentially be able to leverage that in the future is to have full ownership of our data. So you need data to feed, a machine that's going to spit out a decision. Say if it's generative design, you need a 3D model, and you need metadata associated to it to eventually be able to leverage that. So baby steps will get you to, even if it's just a piece of a building that's in BIM, it has a positive impact on how you approach everything else, every other, perhaps the rest of your building or your infrastructure. So it's good to start somewhere and not be in that sort of decision paralysis, based on too many potential outcomes. It's good to identify something to chip away at.
So I've just seen one of the questions, Thomas, which I feel would be an interesting one to ask, which is, the biggest current challenge, and I hear it a lot, is who's paying for BIM? Who's paying for this additional work effort, and where is the value and the benefit? I don't know if anybody would like to speak to that one.
I could jump in on that. I mean, we're paying for it regardless as an owner. If we can get efficiencies in the design and handovers to the operations teams, I mean, the capital side is just one side of the equation. And to be honest, in the life cycle of our projects, it's probably the least expensive part. And when you start looking at 60-year building holds and a building that's not set up for success, we pay for it regardless. So, and back to Thomas's question, like with automation comes efficiency, and we would love to build more. Like we want to be productive, we want to do more things, and I don't think you'll see it be a loss of skills. Maybe the skills need to come up to a certain level, but I think you'll find that I always thought the computer would give me more free time, but I ended up working more efficiently and more productively now. So I work the same amount of time, just more productively. And I think that's what BIM is going to do for us. So,
yeah, that's got to be the outcome of all of this, is that we're going to get a higher quality environment to occupy, and we're going to have better infrastructure that lasts longer, or higher or better changeover of our infrastructure as it starts to wear and tear, right? So,
right.
I think the use of technology to enhance what we're doing is always worth the pursuit. Anyways, with that, we've got 3 minutes left. I just have a little bit of housekeeping I want to do before the top of the hour here, but I just want to say thanks so much to Geraldine and the rest of the panel here. Excellent discussion. This will be available as a video on our website, as will all the videos that we recorded today, probably within a week or so. We usually get them out pretty quick. So, if there's something that you missed, or if you want to go back and watch something again, or obviously share it with your industry peers, we definitely want that. If you get value out of this organization, participating and attending, I would ask that you tell a friend and say, hey, you guys should show up and consume this information. It's fantastic to participate. So I want to thank our platinum sponsors. We have a number of sponsors that help us to keep the lights on here at the organization. Our platinum sponsors, especially SolidCAD and GrayTech. Thank you so much to our audience. I think we had about 300 people sign up for today, which is fantastic. These virtual events have been really successful. We've been able to keep the community, connecting and networking and sharing information. We're very pleased, and we expect we're going to continue doing this even after we can start doing things in person again. So thanks so much for attending today. And of course, any owner that attended today, participated, we would love to have you participate in the Development Asset Management and Lifecycle Think Tank. This is a group of leading innovators from across the country that get together on a monthly basis and kind of re-envision the future of how facilities management, asset management, and whatnot, the best practices around this area, the use of technology, driving innovation. They're meeting on a regular basis and thinking about how we can improve the way we operate in this space and producing documents and guidelines and whatnot. So they also help out with the awards and planning events and whatnot. So it's a great way to meet like-minded leaders who are focused on innovation in the industry from across the country. So if you're interested in that, check out our website. It's easy to sign up. Also sign up for our mailing list. If you want to keep informed on all of our events and everything that's happening with the organization, sign up to the mailing list. Easy to do on the website. A couple of key dates for the organization: February 15th, April 15th are the next submission dates for certification. If you're not aware, we have a certification program that basically benchmarks professionals focused on using BIM in their profession, regardless of what discipline they come from. We're all kind of working to manage the same process across all contributors. The intent of the certification is to recognize that people are at a certain level in their career where they're either implementing the use of BIM on a project or deploying it or training others. So if you're interested in the certification program, check out the website. We also have our annual awards program. Was a huge success last year. Tons of submissions, fantastic award show. I'd recommend go back and watch it if you're interested. But the submissions are going to be open for the 2021 awards on February 1st. So check that out, and we welcome lots of submissions. We want to recognize the really innovative things that are happening across Canada, especially from the owner's perspective. And that pretty much wraps it up. So I just want to thank the CanBIM team for helping us to organize and execute this event, and everyone who contributed to planning it. Thank you so much, and hope everyone has a great day. Take care.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you,
care,
Tom.
everybody.
Okay, bye.